The series begins with the start of the new academic year at university, where there is a welcoming party for new students. A new student named John attends, and all the girls are impressed by him because he is handsome, famous, and wealthy. However, despite having many followers on his social media pages, he actually feels lonely. We see another student at the same university named Yun, and we learn that his financial situation is difficult, and he works multiple jobs to the extent that he has no time for rest or love. We then meet a student named Jen, who is always in the library. Despite studying a lot, her grades are still poor. Then, the first day of classes begins. John enters the lecture hall, and all the girls are amazed by his handsome appearance. He sits behind a sleeping student, and when the professor enters for the lecture, he tries to wake him up, but accidentally spills coffee on him. He apologizes and gives him a tissue, but the student isn't interested. After the lecture, he offers him money as compensation, but he refuses and leaves. John is surprised by his behavior, and his friend tells him that he doesn't care because he is like a robot. Then we see in the girls' dormitory as they arrange their belongings, hoping that their roommate will be nice, tidy, and sociable so they can get along well. Shaya enters, and she is surprised to find her very beautiful, and with only one bag. She offers to help her and takes her to get the rest of her bags. Jen is surprised by the many bags. She tells herself why she refrained from offering help and continues to carry the bags until she's exhausted. At night, we see John staying up with his friends at a club, and it's evident that they accompany him to take advantage of him and have him pay the bill because he comes from a wealthy family. John enters a supermarket to buy drinks and notices Yun working there. He tries to get to know him and invites him to hang out, offering to pay the bill, but the person embarrasses him, saying not everything can be bought with money. Meanwhile, Jen stays up, brainstorming projects for her university portfolio after graduation. However, Shaya tells her she only sleeps in the darkness, forcing her to turn off the light. The next day, she goes to the secretary's office, and as she opens the door, she bumps into John outside. She feels tense and embarrassed being close to the most famous student at the university. From the secretary, she learns that John took the project, leaving her with no option but to ask him for it. The secretary volunteers her for the new student trip, and Jen reluctantly agrees. She tells her friend, who laughs and teases her for having to clean up after the new students. The next day, she finds out he's volunteering alongside her, and she feeling tense because he is the smartest student in university and always receives scholarships. Then, the new students start to get to know each other, and John notices that Jen looks at him a lot, thinking she might have a crush on him. At night, John sees her standing alone and approaches her, asking why she stares at him. But she gets nervous and embarrassed, saying her friend is calling her. John then tries to get closer to Yoon to become friends, but Yoon ignores him, and he tells him he doesn't have time to socialize or go out with anyone. When everyone goes to sleep, he cleans the place and collects empty bottles. Jen goes to help him, mentioning that she sent him messages when they were together in social activities, but he didn't reply. He tells her he never received anything from her, making her feel embarrassed, so she leaves to go to bed. However, she sees John standing with his drunk friend, who is arguing with him because the girl he likes is interested in John. His friend starts hitting him, and Jen steps in to defend him, but his friend tries to hit her. Yun interferes, knocking his friend to the ground and asks her to treat John's wounds. Jen starts sterilizing his wound and takes the opportunity to ask him to give up the project. John thinks she defended him because of that, so he agrees, but on the condition that she becomes his closest friend. Jen is surprised by his request, but reluctantly agrees. We see John before he sleeps, going through his messages and finding Jen's messages, realizing she was telling the truth. The next day, he apologizes to her, saying he didn't mean to. After that, John asks Jen to play a game with him, but she refuses because she's scared of it. John promises her that if she plays with him, he will give up the project as soon as they return. She reluctantly agrees, feeling tense and fearful. However, John encourages her, telling her to trust him, and he takes her and swings her from above. Jen remains tense and scared while being held by John. He notices that someone is watching them while they play the game, and it seems that person is interested in them. Later, they return to the university, and Jen asks John if he spoke to the secretary and gave up the project for her. But he tells her he forgot and promises to tell her the next day, leaving her and walking away. However, he is surprised to see his brother in front of him and learns that he has transferred to teach at the university. His brother asks him not to tell their parents. Yoon is standing there watching them. At night, Yoon is working at the supermarket. Ran, his friend, comes to him and asks him to treat her to a drink because she doesn't see him often due to his work. She tells him to take a break from his life routine and hang out with his friends who are in the same year. However, Yoon has to do this because he relies on himself. We see him waking up early and not having slept much to the extent that he falls asleep on public transportation. He keeps running until he reaches the university on time. In the end, the lecture gets canceled, and he regrets coming. John sees him and thanks him for helping him during the journey, but Yoon tells him he didn't do it for him and doesn't think they became friends. Jen arrives and finds them standing together, expecting them to argue. But Yoon leaves them and walks away. Jen is upset because John didn't keep his promise to her, thinking he deceived her. But John takes her and goes to the secretary, giving up the project for her. They realize they're in the same class. John is happy to see her often and walks with her in the rain, holding an umbrella over her the whole way. The next day, Jen wakes up and is surprised to find Ran sleeping on the floor. We learn that she's her roommate in the dorm. Her behavior is strange, asking for weird favors, and Jen reluctantly agrees because she's afraid of her. Later, Yoon returns to his dorm and finds his younger brother there, learning that he's applying to the police academy. He's upset because he won't be able to continue his studies and remembers their father, who was a policeman and died, leaving them alone when they were young. Since then, he has been relying on himself. Later, Jen goes to see a doctor about her project and asks her to do a specific analysis and present it to her. At night, Shayna is sitting upset and crying because her boyfriend wants to break up with her. She remembers his words when he said she looks good, but her personality isn't right for him. She returns to the dorm. Jen and Rahan talk to her and invite her to eat with them, but she refuses and goes to sleep. Meanwhile, John's friends go to his house and want to stay over. He refuses, but they enter and mess up the house. John is upset because he knows they're only hanging out with him for his money. The next day, in class, he ignores them and sits next to Yoon, bringing him coffee and trying to talk to him. However, Yoon gets up and sits alone to get some sleep. The professor enters and asks them to form project teams. He tells them to divide into groups. John and his friends are in Yoon's team. After class, Jen hesitates to join their team, but John insists that she agrees. He's excited to be with her and takes her number. The team gathers to discuss the project, and they decide to make Yoon the team leader. Then John receives a call from his mom, telling him to come home because there's a family gathering with his uncle and aunt. From their conversation, we understand that she doesn't care about him and always prioritizes her brother over him. At night, she is deeply upset about her breakup and goes to the supermarket. The can falls from her, and she continues to cry. Yoon sees her, helps her, and cleans the floor. She buys a drink and charges it to him, saying it's a gift for him, then runs off. Yoon tries to follow her because he doesn't like anyone helping him, but she walks away. The next day, there's a team meeting, and Jen confirms with everyone to attend, but only John and Yoon show up. Jen tries to talk to them, but they don't respond. Yoon suggests kicking them out of the team and dividing the work among the three of them. However, John refuses, saying they must have valid reasons for not attending. Jen decides to divide the work among all of them, with her taking on tasks not done by others. As the team leader, she faces resistance from Yoon, who insists on withdrawing and leaving them. When they follow him, they meet John's friends who are drunk. Yoon tells them to take responsibility, or they will be a burden on the team. They get agitated and try to fight him. John intervenes, trying to calm them down, but his friends hit him, causing him to fall to the ground, and they argue with Yoon. John recalls his childhood memories of experiencing domestic violence and feeling helpless. He becomes agitated and cries, yelling to stop the argument. Everyone is surprised by his behavior. Then, Jen treats Yun's wound and puts a medical bandage on it, asking him not to leave the team because they need him. Reluctantly, Yun agrees, but he refuses to reconcile with John for the sake of the team and leaves. John walks away and meets his brother, getting into his car. It's evident that he doesn't want to go home, and we learn that they come from a wealthy family. At a family gathering, John wears a wig to hide his hair color, which his family criticizes. He defends himself, saying he attends a regular university, not a prestigious one like Seoul University, which angers his father. After the gathering, his father beats him, blaming his mother for inviting him. His mother, instead of comforting him, blames herself for raising a failure like him, removes the wig, insults his hair, and kicks him out of the house. When John leaves, he finds his brother waiting in the car and decides not to return home because he feels unloved and unwanted by his family. He asks him to take him down, recalling his parents' words. He calls his friends who take advantage of him and tells them he's inviting them and will foot the bill. He continues drinking until he loses consciousness. His friends envy his lifestyle, thinking it's easy because he's rich, handsome, and popular, but they don't know he's suffering. He calls Yun, threatening to kill himself if he doesn't come, but Yun is at work. He then calls Jen because she's the team leader, and she reluctantly agrees to go. When she arrives, she finds him standing by the lake, wanting to throw himself in. He asks her to be with him, but she confesses she likes someone else. John arrives, barely conscious, and Jen has to carry him home. He goes to wash his hands in the bathroom and finds it clean and spacious, unlike his cramped and dirty apartment bathroom, which saddens him. Later, he leaves the house with Jen and asks her not to let anyone know he was carried home so he won't have to thank anyone. The next day, John wakes up, having forgotten everything. He tries to remember what happened, but he can't. He calls Jen to ask who brought him home, but she refuses to tell him and dodges the question. Later, the doctor who asked Jen to approach John about giving up the project thinks John was pressured into it, but Jen tells her that he did it willingly. John realizes that Yoon must have been the one who brought him home because he was the last person he talked to yesterday. He goes to sit with Jen and asks her who the person she mentioned yesterday that she likes is. Jen is surprised that he remembers their conversation and tells him it's someone close to her, but he doesn't seem to take it seriously and assumes she means her friend. John takes her to a place to watch the sunset and tells her he'll help her make the person she likes notice her, giving her advice on how to get his attention. Afterwards, Jen goes to Chan's dorm and finds the place a mess. She calls him, but he promises to come later and she ends up cleaning and tidying up the place herself, waiting for him, but he never shows up. John sees her from the balcony because he's her neighbor. He realizes that the person she likes and becomes friends with is her companion. The next day, we see John looking for a new room to live in. He has to find another job to be able to afford the rent, but he can't find anyone willing to hire students. Meanwhile, John takes Jen shopping and helps her buy new clothes and change her style to get noticed. He's attracted to her but doesn't want to show it. When she chooses a new dress, he wants to pay for it, but she insists on paying herself as a way to thank him for his time. They have ice cream together and walk until she catches the bus. Later, John returns home. At night, he talks to Chan from the balcony and learns from him that his girlfriend will come to his house tomorrow. He sends a message to Jen asking her to confess her feelings to him. Ren goes to the supermarket. She finds him working and remembering everything because he's using every minute. He comes out to talk to her, and she learns that he's looking for another job to increase his income. Despite being upset because there's no time to see him or go out with him, she asks a friend to intervene on his behalf to get a job. The next day, the team gathers to discuss the matter. John enters with Jen, and his friends are surprised to see them together, thinking they are in a relationship, making Jen feel embarrassed. After they finish and he leaves to catch up on his work, John follows him and tries to treat him to something to thank him for giving him a lift. However, he refuses, saying he's busy. At night, Jen buys food and goes to his apartment to have dinner together as they agreed, but he forgets their arrangement. She arrives, and Jen opens the door for her. She's shocked to see her and feels uncomfortable, so she leaves the apartment. She meets Chan on the stairs and gets tense, leaving them and going downstairs. She remembers her memories with him when they were young, when he gave her a bracelet that she wore, and since then, she wasn't worried about her hands. John sees her standing alone and tells her to come out. When she enters, she continues to cry because Chan had told her that he broke up with his girlfriend months ago, which turned out to be a lie. John sympathizes with her and tells her that she's using him as if he were her boyfriend to wait for her friend or make him change. Jen agrees, and the first thing John does is remove the bracelet from her hand and break it so she won't think about Chan anymore. He takes her out to the balcony, and when they see them, he feels jealous and tells her that she's his girlfriend. Then, John takes her to her destination, and on the way, Chan calls her. However, John takes her phone and prevents her from answering, telling her that he doesn't deserve her feelings and warns her not to talk to him or meet him until he realizes her worth. They continue to joke around on the way, showing that they've grown closer. After that, the appetite goes to the supermarket to see Yoon. It's clear that she's interested in him, but she finds someone else standing in his place and gets annoyed that she couldn't see him. The next day, Yoon is at the university and meets a friend who tells him about a job opportunity. When he goes, he's surprised that it was so easily arranged, realizing that Ran arranged it, and the manager recommended him. So, Yoon decides to reject the job offer, even though it would provide him with accommodation and a lot of money. That night, Ran learns what happened and argues with him because she wanted to help him relax, but Yoon tells her that he doesn't like anyone helping him. He hates being indebted to anyone. The next day, Yoon's brother goes to the university to meet him, and by chance, he sees Shia and immediately likes her. However, he pretends to trip and falls to the ground, pretending to play sports, and the girls laugh at him. Then his brother comes, takes him, and they leave, meeting John along the way, telling her that he's Yoon's friend. His brother is surprised that Yoon has friends and invites him to eat with them. John happily agrees. While they're together, Jen notices how Yoon treats his younger brother and remembers how his own family treated him, making him feel emotional. After they finish eating, he tells Yoon that he's grateful for his brotherhood and that he loves him. He expresses his wish to have a brother like Yoon because he doesn't have any siblings. Later, the team gathers for the project, but John's friends haven't done the required research, so Yoon reprimands them. They get upset and withdraw from the team, asking John to leave with them. However, he refuses and decides to stay with Yoon, promising to provide him with the necessary information for the project, particularly about his father's company. John calls the company's secretary and asks her to get the information from his father. When his father agrees, he doesn't know it's John who wants it, not his older son, so he refuses. Later, Jen learns that her scholarship has been approved, and the secretary calls to congratulate her. A student who's interested in Jen overhears their conversation. When the doctor enters, she initially chooses Jen as her assistant, but the student lies to her, claiming he helped Jen with the scholarship, leading the doctor to change her mind and appoint him as her assistant instead of Jen. Meanwhile, at the supermarket, Jen encounters John's friends who start to say bad things and throw bottles on the floor. Unable to confront them directly because they are customers, he tries to ignore them. However, when Ren arrives, she confronts them physically and shows her prowess, intimidating them and even scaring John's friends from the club. When Yoon returns home, he finds an envelope of money from his brother. He asks his brother where get the money from. He said he'd take John watch and sold it and spend the money, leaving him with what's left. Yoon gets angry with him and leaves, going to John's house. He calls John to come down, surprising him. Yoon tells him that he owes him, intending to repay the money, but John insists that he needs a friend and is working to support himself. They agree to remain friends, albeit reluctantly on Yoon's part. Later, Chan is waiting for Jen, and when they talk, he realizes she's not in a relationship with John, despite her lie. He advises her not to trust him because he knew his girlfriend was coming to see him that day. Despite this, she asks Chan to meet with him to resolve the situation between them. Chan recalls the message John sent her that day, but refuses to believe it. She calls John and asks to meet him, and he happily agrees. When they meet, she asks if he knew his girlfriend was coming to see him, and John admits that he did, explaining that he wanted her to end things because he didn't want to see her. Jen feels hurt, and although John tries to explain, she decides they can't be just friends anymore after this incident. They will only be colleagues on the project from now on. She leaves, feeling upset. John remains standing alone, upset after his only friend left him, and he continues to reminisce about their memories together while crying. He decides to go out and stay up late, drinking to try to forget. However, he can't overcome what happened. He calls Yun, who is working late, and tells him that he hurt someone dear to him and doesn't know what to do. Yun advises him to confess his feelings to her and then ends the call. John gathers his courage and rushes to Jen's residence. He calls out to her, surprising her when she sees him from the window and comes down to talk to him. John apologizes to her for hurting her and confesses his true feelings, admitting that he loves her. He asks her not to respond to him right now, but to give him a chance, then leaves. Yun starts feeling dizzy due to overwork and faints. John coincidentally calls him, but the nurse answers and informs him that Yun is in the hospital. John becomes worried and takes a taxi to go to him. He learns from the nurse that Yun has a severe infection. John stays by his side until he wakes up. Yun becomes agitated and wants to leave because he feels indebted. John asks him why he always seems upset around him and tries to distance himself. Yun explains that every time he sees John, he feels envious because his own life is difficult, yet John is always available to him. John laughs, realizing that everyone is deceived by Yun's seemingly happy life. Yun insists that his life is full of problems and asks John to stay away. However, John refuses, stating that no matter how hard Yun tries to push him away, he will always be there for him. He tells the nurse to take care of Yun and leaves. Afterward, Jen starts writing the report. She remembers John's confession of his feelings for her, which confuses her, and she struggles to continue writing. She gathers with her friends in the dorm, and they start drinking, each one sharing her relationship problems. It becomes evident that Ran loves Yun, but he doesn't reciprocate her feelings. Meanwhile, John goes online and searches for food suitable for people with infections. The next day, he buys it and visits Yun in the hospital, only to find out that he's not there. He tries to call him, but Yun doesn't answer. At the same time, Yun goes to his boss and begs him to reinstate John, but the boss refuses, fearing for his health due to excessive stress. He suggests Yun return to work during his vacation, but Yun refused to rest. The next day, Jane decides to confront John about her true feelings when she goes to the university gym. However, she finds many girls around him wanting to take pictures, which embarrasses her, so she walks away. Later, John is compelled to meet his brother at his office and asks him for the information needed for the project. His brother agrees to provide it, but treats him poorly, imposing conditions and refusing to attend the upcoming family gathering because no one wants to see him. John is hurt by his brother's words and mentions that he conducted some analysis to verify if they are his real family, as he is puzzled by their treatment of him. Sadly, it turns out they are his family, but he leaves the file and walks away. Afterward, he meets Jane, who seems to be attracted to him, but she tells him she needs to get to know him better because she doesn't understand his personality well. They agree to remain friends. During his lecture, John sends messages to Yun, asking him to take a break until he feels better. However, he is surprised to see Yun with him in the lecture. When John takes him out, Leon hands him the file he got from his brother, along with an envelope containing money, telling him that the amount he owed him is now settled. John is astonished that he managed to gather it so quickly, even to the point where he thought Leon might have sold his organs. However, Leon assures him that he is no longer indebted to him and asks him to stay away. John refuses, expressing his desire to remain friends no matter what. Meanwhile, the student who became the assistant to the professor is in her office, organizing the research, and comes across Jane's work. He removes her name from it and presents it as his own. Meanwhile, Jane is walking around the university and is surprised to find herself becoming famous. She overhears students talking about her and assuming she's involved with John. Angered by the rumors, she confronts John, accusing him of spreading them. He tells her that he didn't do that and leaves her, walking away with a heavy heart. Later, Jane overhears students mocking her appearance, saying they don't match each other and that John is better looking than her. She recalls memories from her childhood when kids used to bully her because her father left home and ran away with his mistress. Overwhelmed, she collapses to the ground, struggling to breathe. Meanwhile, John is sitting with his team, and his friend asks him about his relationship with Jane. He tells her that there's nothing between them. They're just friends. However, when he hears her speaking badly about Jane, he gets upset and leaves them, calling Jane. Hearing her crying and unable to speak, he becomes worried and starts searching for her everywhere on campus until he finds her sitting alone, struggling to breathe. He approaches her to check on her, but she pushes his hand away, asking him to leave her alone and stay away from her because their relationship is causing her problems. She cries and tells him that his presence with her embarrasses her, and she doesn't want them to remain friends. John walks away feeling sad, remembering his mother's words when she used to tell him that he causes trouble for anyone who gets close to him, and that nobody will love him or be his friend. Jane goes to the professor's office and asks about her research project, but the professor treats her poorly and kicks her out, saying she doesn't want her as her assistant anymore. Later, John's friends find Ran working at the club and continue to bother her, speaking poorly about Yun. She wants to confront them, but her friend stops her. John goes to pay the bill and meets Ran. He's surprised to learn that she's a friend of Yun and asks her what she did to convince him to be friends with her. She tells him that he's a stubborn person, but she sticks around him regardless. When John leaves the club, he's surprised to receive a call from Yun inviting him to dinner. He happily accepts and goes to the restaurant, but upon arriving, he finds Yun working there as a waiter, serving him food. This annoys John, and he tells Yun that he thought they would dine together. He sees Yun mocking him for leaving the customers and making things difficult for himself. John leaves the restaurant feeling upset, waiting outside until Yun finishes work. When Yun exits, John sits far away from him because of the smell of the food from the restaurant. He tells Yun that he invited him to make sure they're both from different worlds and that they can't be friends. John is annoyed by his words, telling him he didn't need to do all that and that from now on. He'll do what he wants and keep his distance from him. The next day, John quits the project team and rejoins his friends, but he's not happy. They try to talk to him, but he's not focused on them. Meanwhile, Jane decides to visit the professor's office again to ask why she was kicked out, hoping to fix things if the problem was on her end. The professor tells her that she didn't like her from the beginning because she doesn't like students who exploit others to achieve their goals, seeing it as a lack of competence. Later, Jane learns from Yun that John had obtained the information they needed for the project before leaving the team. When John's friend hears this, he gets upset and goes with his bully friend to confront Yun at his workplace. They argue, and eventually, the chef kicks Yun out of the restaurant. Yun tries to plead for another chance, but John refuses, saying that it's his last day there. Yun ends up crying by himself. John sees Yun and is surprised, feeling guilty as he walks away. Yun follows him, asking him not to tell anyone that he saw him crying. However, John gets annoyed and tells him that it's okay to ask for help from time to time and that it's not a weakness. He leaves Yun behind and walks away. Moran sees him and calls him, but he ignores her call and refuses to answer. Later, Marin's sister learns from her friend about a student at the university who is involved with Jane, and she is shocked and finds it hard to believe. When she returns home, she tells Rahan, who is also shocked when he learns that Jane and Chan were arguing over a girl. Now, she concludes that it's Jane. When Jane returns, they treat her nicely, and they ask her what she did to make them believe in her love. Jane feels embarrassed and tells them it's just rumors. The next day, she waits for John and gives him a plant as an apology, expressing regret for her outburst. She asks him to return to the project team and tells him to look up the meaning of the plant. She leaves him and runs off. When John looks up the meaning of the plant, he finds that it symbolizes sincere apology, and he laughs at her gesture. Afterwards, Jane is at the university, and John's friends corner her, demanding information from her. They continue to harass her until she breaks down in tears. John arrives and scolds them. He separates from their group and takes Jane with him, walking away. He realizes that Yun was the one who asked her to return to the project. He goes with her to meet him, but their relationship is still tense. Jane leaves them to talk, and Yun apologizes for what he said. John tells him that he has forgotten about what happened. The professor finds out that her assistant stole Jane's research and presented it as his own. She feels guilty for mistreating her. Later, Yun finds another job at a restaurant, but he has to work during the day and is late for the meeting. Jane is surprised because it's not like him to be late. Then, John takes Jane to her old school to confront her past and deal with the trauma she's been through. When they arrive, she remembers her memories and continues to cry. John tries to comfort her until she feels better. Afterward, they walk together, and she almost trips and falls. But John catches her and ties her shoelaces. Jen is touched of what he did, and they continue walking happily together. The secretary is surprised that the doctor used Jane's research in her project, so she goes to ask her about it. However, the doctor threatens to expose her, so the secretary gets scared and leaves her office. Later, as the project deadline approaches, John's friends ask Jane to rejoin the team, but she refuses because they didn't put any effort into the project. In the lecture, the team begins discussing the project in front of the doctor, who is impressed with their work. However, one of John's friends tells the doctor that they were part of the project and that they stole his work and kicked him out of the team. He talks about things that are actually in the project, and it turns out that he learned about them from a girl who saw Jane's laptop open and took a picture of part of it and sent it to him. Jane decides to confront him since she is the team leader, and she is nervous because she is afraid of crowds, but she remembers John's words and encourages herself. She starts arguing with his friends and is able to prove that they are lying, and the doctor is convinced by her words. He gives them full marks, and the team is happy with the success of the project, and they get closer. After that, Rand goes to see Yoon, and they keep teasing each other, so she hits him for not answering her calls. She sees them and gets upset because she likes Yoon. At night, John goes out with Jane to celebrate, and they keep drinking together. Jane starts hallucinating and confesses her true feelings to him. John is happy and gets closer to her, but she feels embarrassed and pushes him away. John is forced to carry her on his back and walks with her until he reaches her apartment. Later, he receives a call from Yoon asking to meet him. Yoon shows him a video of the chef firing him from work, which is posted online. He asks him if he did it. John confesses that he did it to get him his rights back. He expects Yoon to get angry, but Yoon surprises him and thanks him for what he did. John is happy with his words, and it's clear that they have gotten closer. The next day, Jane wakes up and thinks about what happened yesterday. She feels embarrassed and doesn't want to go to university, but she goes anyway. Her phone is dead, and she keeps looking for John. She runs into Chan by chance, and he walks with her and asks her to be his girlfriend again, but she refuses. At the same time, John tries to call her, but her phone is off. He sees them together and feels jealous, and he pulls her by the hand. He talks to her about what happened yesterday. At first, Jane pretends that she doesn't remember anything, but then she gathers her courage and tells him that she does remember, and confesses that she likes him. John is happy and hugs her, and he also confesses to her. They agree to be together, and they walk in front of everyone holding hands. There is a festival, and they watch Rand's team perform dangerous stunts, and they are amazed by her strength. Later, John participates in the festival and keeps singing, and everyone is amazed by his beautiful voice. But he keeps looking at Jane and focusing on her. Sia and Iran are sitting next to John, and they both like him. Sia tries to get close to him and asks him to go out with her, but he tells her that he is busy. Rand feels jealous and pulls him by the hand, and she takes him to her apartment, There, she has a surprise for them for his birthday. John comes and gives Jane a rose. Shia arrives. They keep singing and celebrating Yoon, and they are happy. They find Yoon embarrassed and not in the mood, so they push Ran into a cake and take pictures with her while laughing. Then, they play the truth game. When it's Yoon's turn, they ask him if he has any friends. He tells them 2.5. When they ask him who the half is, he says Jane, and they keep laughing. Then it's Jane's turn, and they ask her if she's related to John. She replies, yes. When the party ends, Sia keeps looking at John's picture, and it's clear that she likes him. Jane volunteers at the festival, and John helps her. They see his friends, and they decide to take advantage of him. They write a sign, whoever wants to take a picture with him pays money. A lot of girls gather, but John refuses and runs away from them. Later, he learns from Ran that she's applying to be his brother, the doctor's assistant. He gets upset and asks her not to apply. Jane is surprised and asks him if he knows her, but John refuses to tell her. He leaves her and walks away. Then, his friends take her as John's girlfriend and let some admirers harass her with words. When John finds out, he goes back to her and yells at them and protects her. He gets into a fight with his friends, but they beat him up and knock him to the ground. John remembers when his brother used to beat him up when he was little, and he decides to stand up again and keeps taking the beating. Then, John tells Jane that this is his true nature, and that he always gets beaten up and doesn't know how to defend himself. Jane embraces him, telling him she loves him and drives him home. Then she accompanies him inside and sterilizes his wound. She stays with him until he falls asleep. The next day, Jane visits him at home, bringing him medicine, and when he sees her, he hugs her. However, after the call, John realizes from his brother's voice that he is worried. When Jane ends the call, John confesses the truth to her, telling her that his brother treats him cruelly and is the person he hates most in the world because he used to abuse him when he was little. Jane feels shocked and saddened by his words. Later, she meets Yoon Ran, who surprises her with his violent behavior towards John's friends because of him. He hints to her that he has become John's friend and feels responsible. Afterward, one of John's friends tries to take advantage of him, asking him to live with him in his apartment because of his housing problems. But John refuses because he saw him hit Yun the day before and was not satisfied with the intervention. Then John goes to meet the friend who hit him and tells him he will report him to the police. But his friend threatens him that he will report Yun if he does so because he hit him because of him. John is surprised to learn that Yun fought because of him. He goes to thank him and tells him that he wished he had an older brother to defend him a long time ago. Suddenly, he receives a call from his brother informing him that their mother is sick and needs surgery on her back, and if the operation is not performed, she won't be able to walk again. He reassures him and asks him to focus on his studies and that he will handle it. He goes to take a form from the secretary to resign from the university and be able to work, and he goes to get his belongings. His brother comes and sees the place where he lives, feeling dismayed by his constant sacrifices for him. He tells him that he has decided to leave the police academy and work as well to bring in money because he won't let him suffer alone. But John refuses and tells him that he will take care of it, and his brother leaves while crying. John sees him and understands everything from him. Afterward, he learns that the costs of his mother's surgery have been covered, and he learns from his brother that John was the one who paid for it. Then, he asks Jane to meet him, and when she goes to him, he confesses to her that he loves her and wants her to be his girlfriend. But Jane tells him that it's too late, and she no longer loves him, and she is now committed to John. After that, she talks to Ran, and she tells her that she admires Yun, and Ran also discovers that she admires him. They both agree to confess their feelings, and Yun, who loves her, is chosen. Afterwards, the teacher meets Yun and tells him that he was once a student with similar problems and managed to overcome them, asking him not to refuse help because he has plenty of time and can repay anyone who helps him. Yun is affected by his words and calls John to meet him and thank him for what he did. They spend time together, exchanging conversations about their lives, and they show that they are close friends. Shia decides to confess her love to Yoon and asks Jane for help. The next day, Jane invites Shia to dinner, and Shia tries to tell him about her feelings. Afterward, she asks him to talk privately, and when he agrees, she confesses her love to him. However, Yoon apologizes to her that he doesn't have time for a relationship because of work. Shia cries, and Ran witnesses the situation. At night, Yoon goes to collect his belongings from the accommodation and finds himself homeless, so he sleeps on the street and dreams of his deceased father embracing him and crying, telling him that he did everything he could to protect his mother and brother, but he felt tired. John receives a message from the bank and realizes that Yoon has paid off all his debts, worrying about him and searching for him in the streets until he finds him, asking him to live with him in the accommodation. Yoon initially refuses, but John insists until he agrees, and Yoon sleeps on the couch from exhaustion, covered by John, feeling happy. Afterward, Shia tells Ran that she confessed her feelings to Yoon and was rejected without consideration, causing her to start crying. Ran tries to calm her down, telling her that she envies her because she's afraid of confessing and being rejected and losing him. The next day, Yoon wakes up to find John has prepared breakfast for him, and they have it together. However, he is surprised that John bought the food at a higher price than it deserves, prompting him to ask Yoon to choose clothes with him to use, leaving Yoon astonished because all his t-shirts look alike. Later on, Jane finds herself in John's brother's office and sees him watching a video of John being beaten up, so she asks about it, and Jane tells him that he was defending her, revealing to him that she knows they are brothers, surprising him and making him realize that she is committed to John and that he was the one who informed her. After that, she goes to meet John and tells him that his brother asked about him and was interested in him. But she discovers from John that he pretends to be tough in front of people, while in reality, he is annoyed by him. Jane leaves to go to class, but she meets her friend, who apologizes to her for what he did and asks her to join him and the rest of the friends to apologize to her. Jane believes him and goes with him, and he leads her into a room and closes the door, starting to film her in a live video and writing that he is having a great time with his girlfriend. John starts running to reach her, trying to call her, but his friend takes the phone from her. Jane tries to escape, but he stops her and assaults her. John arrives and argues with him, hitting him and comforting Jane, but his friend comes from behind and attacks him, attempting to strangle him. However, she arrives in time and hits him, and the security comes and arrests him. Afterward, Jane cleans her wound and apologizes to him for what happened because of her. But John reassures her, saying he was worried about her, and apologizes for not arriving on time. Then, John finds his brother waiting for him, talking to him, and asking him why he didn't hit the person who hit him. John tells him that he can't forget his past when he used to be beaten as a child, and he's used to enduring beatings without retaliation. His brother's words affect him, and John leaves him and goes to his apartment. At night, he is sleeping and dreaming nightmares that his brother is hitting him. He wakes up frightened, crying. When Yoon returns from work, he finds him afraid and temperling. He goes to reassure him. The next day, Jane wears a beautiful dress and goes to meet John as they agreed, but he is late. When she calls him, he tells her he won't be able to meet her. Jane worries and goes to check on him, but she finds him locked in his room and decides to leave him alone and not pressure him. He sees her leaving and tries to talk to her, but she refuses and leaves him. Chuck feels worried because their relationship is tense and he continued drinking. He sees Ron sitting beside him and asks for her number, but she refuses. He tells her it's not the first time he's been rejected, and she apologizes and asks him to engage in conversation with her. After that, John thanks Yoon for being with him and knows from him that Jin came to see him yesterday. He is surprised and goes to meet her, apologizing for not contacting her yesterday and explaining that he didn't want her to see him in that state. Jane hugs him and tells him she'll be there for him whenever he needs her. Afterward, Professor Park organizes a camping trip at the university, but no one signs up for it. Dr. S mocks him, but later John learns about it and joins her along with his peers. Professor Park is delighted to see them and they continue playing together, having a good time. At night, they gather around a fire and start playing the confession game. Chan asks fans of someone in attendance to put down their fingers, surprising everyone and making them curious about the fan next to them. Then, they play the memory game, where each person talks about their life and painful memories. John recalls a memory from his childhood when his brother was crying and asking for forgiveness, feeling amazed. When John asks him what happened, he tells him that he doubts the validity of his memories and that he needs to confirm them to know the truth. He prepares to meet his brother on the way, but feels a headache and remembers another memory, where his father was hitting him, feeling confused. When he talks to his brother, he confesses to him that their father used to hit him when he was young. John is surprised and asks him why they didn't tell the truth before. His brother apologizes to him, and it becomes clear that he was kicking him out of the house to protect him from their abusive father. John expresses his gratitude to his brother for revealing the truth and returns to his apartment. Yun also returns to the apartment feeling worried about John. When he finds him, he reassures him and shares everything that happened, discovering that his brother loved him and protected him from afar all this time. Meanwhile, Jen is also worried and wants to make sure John is okay, but she hesitates to pressure him and waits until he tells her personally. Ran can't sleep because she thinks Yun likes Shia, while Shia thinks he likes Ran. The next day, John meets with Jen and assures her that the misunderstanding between him and his brother has been resolved, and Jen expresses her joy, confirming that she was sure of his brother's love for him. Afterward, students in the lecture talk about their role models, and John chooses Yoon as his role model because he is diligent and dedicated, despite working multiple jobs, and always gets high grades. Jane also chooses Yoon as her role model, indicating that she trusts and relies on him, and Yoon feels embarrassed by their words. When they leave the lecture, Shia waits for Yoon and asks to talk to him, learning from him that the girl he likes is Ran. Shia confesses that she doesn't regret expressing her feelings to him, and she's happy to get to know him, thanking him for the opportunity to talk to him. Then she leaves. John takes a walk with Jane, and when they reach his apartment, he finds his mother inside the dwelling. She starts mocking him about the girl she saw him with. She asks him about his brother because she couldn't reach him, and he doesn't respond to her calls. Suddenly, his mother starts crying, and John notices bruises on her hands. He realizes that his father abuses her, and that she has been suffering from violence for a long time. His mother asks him not to talk to anyone about it, then she leaves defeated. John calls his brother and tells him what happened. He learns from his brother that he asked their mother more than once to leave the house and divorce, but she refused. Afterward, they talk about their father, and Yun discovers that their father was a police officer and used violence to protect their mother and brother. John tells his brother about the violence he experiences from their father and how he is suffering, surprising Yun because he didn't know the extent of his brother's suffering. Later, John Dad watches a video of him hitting his son. He then asks his driver to monitor him whenever John goes. His dad sees him in the university with Jean, while Ron is sleeping and dreaming about Yun is marrying Shia. When she wakes up, she feels panicked. The doctor advises her to talk to him before it's too late, so Ran encourages her and goes to confess her feelings to Yun, expressing her joy that this opportunity has arisen. They talk together and continue the crime. After that, Jane tells him about her life, informing him that her family separated when she was young, and her mother left home and departed. Jane is waiting for a call from her mother, but she hasn't called her. John tells her that she received a call from her mother a while ago and feels confused about what to do. John encourages her to answer the call and talk to her mother sincerely, instead of giving in to sadness. Jane responds to John's advice and meets her mother, apologizing to her and expressing her longing for her. However, Jane's mother refuses, telling her that she needed her in the past, but now she can rely on herself. Jane feels frustrated and sad, crying, but John tries to calm her down and suggests that she needs time to forgive her mother. He holds her hand and encourages her to keep moving forward. The two of them walk together and are surprised to find the driver waiting for them, informing them that their father wants John home, which worries Jane, But John reassures her and tells her that everything will be okay, then leaves her with the driver and returns home. Jane goes to her brother's office and tells him that their father asked John to come home, which alarms her brother, prompting him to rush after him. While driving, John remembers a similar incident from his childhood when his father threatened to expose him if he hit him again and asked him to leave him alone, promising to fulfill his wishes. At the same time, John is at home, and his father shows him a video of himself being hit and demands that he return home to live under his care. But John strongly refuses, angering his father who tries to hit him, but his brother intervenes and stops him, and John leaves the room. John's brother faces their father and warns him not to approach his brother again, and it seems that his father is afraid of him. John's mother arrives and continues knocking on his door persistently, breaking down and crying. John remembers the same situation when he was little, but this time his mother calls the police and reports her husband for assaulting her and her children. John thanks his brother for his help and apologizes to him, then returns to his apartment where Yoon is waiting for him anxiously, so John tries to reassure him. John breaks down in tears, and Yoon stays by his side to comfort him. Days pass, and John remains depressed, isolated in his room without talking to anyone. The students at the university notice his absence and try to check on his condition through Jane, who herself finds it difficult to communicate with him. And the first thing he does is hug her and express his longing for her. John sits with Yoon and talks to him. Suddenly, their friend who had previously kidnapped Jane appears before them, apologizing to John for his actions and announcing his intention to leave the university. John refuses to allow him to ruin his life and demands that he apologize to Jane and start anew. His friend feels regret and remorse and agrees, then leaves. He apologizes to Jane in front of the students, breaking down in tears, and asks for her forgiveness, which Jane grants, expressing her forgiveness. After that, the professor enters and asks them for a project for the end of the semester, indicating that it's an opportunity to make up for previous project grades. He announces John's friend's enthusiasm and his team's agreement to the project, and they gather together to plan and prepare for it. While rumors spread about John's mother reporting her husband for violence, John's dad returns to his apartment and searches for her, but she isn't there. He's desperately trying to communicate with her. Then he talks to John saying he needs to change himself and apologize for the people he harmed. His father ignores his words and tries to hit him, but John stands up to him, asserting his change and his lack of fear of him anymore. John's father returns home and finds his son there, asking him to bring his mother back home, but he apologizes, saying he's tired from work and expresses his love for them. However, the son responds by saying he doesn't consider himself part of the family, indicating that he said this phrase before to someone close to him, and it hurt him, and it was John's brother who meant it. Later, we learn that Shia has left the dorm and moved from the university, and Jin, Ran, feel her absence and miss her, feeling that the dorm is tasteless without her. The next day, the team gathers to work on the project and suggests collaborating with the actress from the media department, and the actress agrees to help with the project. That same night, John cooks dinner and sits with Yun to eat together, and they converse and reconcile, continuing their dialogue in a friendly manner as siblings. The next day, Yun meets his brother and gives him a gift, and Yun discovers that they are memories from their father, and his brother talks about their father's desire for him to be a policeman like him, asking him to take care of himself a little and to stop worrying about them. Afterwards, the doctor discovers that the secretary has resigned due to marriage and asks the student who was helping her to take her place, but the doctor refuses after discovering the trick Jin did to write his name on the account. She asks him to work on improving himself. In the team meeting to work on the project, a decision is made to make the project address the aspects of light and darkness in each person's life in the team. On the day of the presentation, John requested to be the one to present the project, surprising everyone as he was the youngest among them, but they encouraged and supported him. John spoke about the project and how each member of the team needs support to reveal the light within them. When the video describing their lives in their youth was presented, it impressed and moved everyone, and they supported and encouraged the team. Jin requested that another video about the project's behind the scenes be played, showing the team's exhaustion and how they helped and supported each other. Everyone admired their friendship and dedication, and they won the Best Project and Presentation Award. After the success, Chuck meets Jean and tells her he is going to join the army, thanking her for staying for him all this time, and expressing regret that her presence was granted and he couldn't confess his love till he lost her. He wishes her to be happy in the future. He hugs her goodbye and she closes her eyes till he leaves because she doesn't want to see him crying. Ron confesses her feelings for Yoon, and she tells him she knows he knows, but she doesn't say anything about it. So she decides to stay away from him, but they will remain friends. Ran goes to the club to run, and there they meet and start talking, discovering that they may feel attracted to each other. Afterwards, Young returns to John's apartment and tells him that he will spend the summer at his uncle's house to take care of his mother, which saddens John. But Young assures him that he will remain his friend and will return to see him. They spend enjoyable time together, exchanging laughs and jokes, then return to studying after 2 months. In class, John finds himself asleep, and Young sits behind him, trying to wake him up, accidentally spilling coffee on him, which makes them laugh. After finishing their studies, Young looks for a job, expressing that there's no time for love, but he feels happy with his friends who lighten his burden. That's all for today's video. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button and check out our other selection of recaps. Take care.